Now people have been asking me to make more Final Fantasy VII Remake videos, so I've decided to give the people what they want. So here we are with another Final Fantasy VII Remake video, and this one is all about Midgar and environments. Now you might remember me talking all about whether we got a little glimpse into the origins of Midgar, based on that Midgar cinematic that we saw in the Shinra building. If you click the card in the corner of this video, you can find out more about that theory. But today, I want to analyse how we experienced the present day Midgar in game. And that's both the good aspects and the failings too. You see, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a bit strange when it comes to locations in general. Typically, we're used to having multiple locations in all our Final Fantasy main entries. We tend to travel all over the world, leave the planet, stop wars, cause wars, and maybe even fell a god or two. But with those, we tend to get loads of different cultures, lots of different architecture, and impossible and gravity-defying structures. And we're used to seeing this in Final Fantasies, and it all helps us get immersed and really gets us into the game, and it's part of what we look forward to. However, the remake could not do that. Instead, we were stuck in one city with essentially one culture, one architecture style, and one sentient civilian species. So, from the outset, that's a downside to the remake's locations. But still, Midgar itself is an intriguing place, and the variation of the different parts of the megacity do make up for some of the variety that we won't see until later parts of this franchise, or of this series. Just think about it, we go to the plates, then to the underside of the plate, then to the slums under the plate, then under the slums in the sewers that are under the slums under the plate. So we go to all different parts basically is what I'm trying to say, and I thought that was great. We didn't get to do all that in the original game, and it's good that we got to see a bit more of the inner workings of Midgar. And you know I love really good lore when it comes to my movies, my games, my comics, my books. So when you see the inner workings of the city, when you see where the railway workers would eat their lunch, how the maintenance staff would work on the underplate, how the workers made their way into town using the train, all of that does really well to immerse you in the world and immerse the audience in the world and really feel more connected to this place, make it feel like it's real. Now we've of course also got a lot of symbolism that's typical of the Final Fantasy games. Midgar in itself is a city of haves and have-nots, and this hierarchical system has the majority of the people living in the slums. The middle class are still struggling to get by, but they're highly oblivious to the struggles of the larger community which live underneath them, so they live on the plates. And the elite and their soldiers do their own thing. They live in Sector 1 and the tower in Shinra building. You also get those tidbits of information like how Wool Market came about to entertain the workers that were building the reactors, or how one of the plates fell during the construction, and you can literally see that gap in the sky. And on the subject of the sky, Midgar on a macro scale is visually stunning. They really managed to imbue it with a sense of scale that made you pause for a second and just admire its magnitude. So think about that first morning when you come out of your apartment and the light at first is blinding, so your entire screen just gets overexposed and you can't really make out anything. And then the camera adjusts to the light just like our eyes normally would, which I found a very cool effect by the way. And then after that you can see the Sector 7 slums. And then if you angle your camera up that first time, you see far in the distance that plate, and the sheer scale of where you are just hits you. It just has you sitting there smiling for a few minutes. I found it really impressive stuff. And even though people did complain about poor textures and the facial animations, I mean we couldn't really miss them. It didn't bother me. It didn't bother me overall. I really did get a feel for how big the city was and how hard it must have been to make, both on a technical level, so for the game creators, but also on a physical level, people creating it, because you can see evidence of its construction, you can see the cranes, you can see the tools. And of course this also makes the plight of the slum dwellers even more saddening, the fact that you see all the hard work that they put into building the city and the way that they're treated. But either way, even though we saw it, we didn't see enough. I would have really have liked to see other sector slums and other sectors in general, so the actual plates, because we only saw one. And the world of Final Fantasy VII, the original and as a whole, suffers from not having multiple cultures. Think of Final Fantasy X or 12. They had several cultures and several sentient races as well. Unlike many developed megacities in the real world, where district to district and borough to borough and ward to ward, you tend to have many different visual languages, cultural connotations and so on, we didn't have that with Midgar, and it felt a bit strange. So let me give you an example. I live in London, and despite the city being very diverse and everyone living sort of wherever they want, sort of mixed throughout, there are still small trends. Certain areas are still known for specific things. So in some parts of London, there's really obvious visuals which show that this part is more industrial than this part over here, a few miles away. Or this part is more art based and has more creative people there than this part over here. And you can see that. And you feel it when you go from stop to stop, if you're taking the train, or if you're driving, you see it as you drive from one area into another. And you also find a similar thing with cultures. Even though people are still spread all over, you'll still go to certain areas where you might see people who and elements of culture which are more Caribbean based, or go to areas where there's more of a Jewish presence, or to areas where there's more of a visually Indian presence, and within that there might be the subcultures and the different religions as well, which have their own sort of culture which is prominent in that area. So having that sort of effect will be really good for Midgar, being able to see different cultures in this world that we didn't really see in the last games. If we had seen that put into this game, I think that would have been a lot better than the sort of drab industrial world which we saw right throughout from top to bottom. I really do think that having that subtlety would have immersed us, it would have solidified Midgar as a living, breathing city that we can relate to, and having those different cultural cues laid over that the industrial aesthetic of the city would have definitely given us a break from the homogeneity that we saw in the game. It was all very homogeneous, very same-like throughout. And it would also have given us a taste for what could come later in the story, because at the moment we don't really have all that much to look forward to, apart from cities which look very much like Midgar, or towns which look very much like just small sections of Midgar. So, what do you think of Midgar in general? Do you think it worked really well as a Final Fantasy location, or do you think that it failed to reach its full potential as an amazing Final Fantasy environment? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. So that's all for today. If you're interested in more of our Final Fantasy VII Remake theories or other Final Fantasy videos or game videos in general, feel free to click any of the links that are appearing on screen now. That's all for now. Until next time.